Welcome to the Fall to Grace. This is a podcast where we hope to bring a grounded, practical approach to spirituality and mystic wisdom. I'm Cyan and today my friend Connor Hatton and I are going to talk about what it means to do the work when it comes to spirituality. I think it's the most important topic, and it's something that a lot of people gloss over when they're talking about spiritual topics because there's this misconception that as long as you're just like raising your vibe, man, it's enough. But really, it takes quite a bit of vigilance and quite a bit of work, quite frankly. But we think the work is worth it. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yes, but I also think it's very hard, right?
Yeah.
Which you touched on. Like in so many of these spiritual circles, there's always this concern with spiritual bypassing. And everybody's always accusing one another of spiritual bypassing, which is like, just to define it, is just pretending that you're more achieved than you are, or more enlightened than you are. And I think it's a really interesting idea in a spiritual life because it is something that is easy to fall into. It's easy to believe that when you know about these things, that you're doing these things. And that, like, the more you inform yourself spiritually, the more kind of elevated you become, or the further along the path that you get. But it disregards a lot of what the actual work is, which is very deeply personal and it's very deeply individual. When we're getting started on our spiritual journey, we do start to join communities, and maybe we, enjoy a ceremony, or, there's so many of those are so popular right now: cacao ceremonies, ayahuasca ceremonies, whatever it is. And you come into these spaces that are very sacred and very spiritual. And those spaces and those interactions can give you a false sense of improvement in a lot of ways. So I want to talk about that. I mean, I really want to dive into, like, what does it actually mean to do the work? I don't think people are trying to spiritually bypass anything. Like, I don't think this is a deliberate effort on people's part to appear higher and mightier than they are, though that's often how it comes off. But actually doing the work and working on, the humility, the discipline, all of the things that it takes to further spiritually it's far different than sitting in a ceremony, and it's far different than meditating once or twice. It's about actually investing in yourself and investing in your life and doing this every single minute of every single day, because that's what the work actually requires, is constant vigilance. So I know you were talking about, I think the reason that we're talking about this is that you were talking about how you have been changing some of these things about yourself and how you've been really adamantly working on some of these things, and you're experiencing that fatigue. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I don't know if I'd say I'm experiencing fatigue, but I am just noticing how vigilant you really do have to be, and that is what spurred this topic, is a conversation Connor and I had the other day. Because I caught him kind of saying something negative, and I was like, hey, we can't be doing that. But, and then he made a great point. He's like, oh, yeah, that's why so many of these traditions start with mindfulness, because if you don't have your mind somewhat wrangled, if you don't have like a true awareness of what's happening in your mind, then you have no baseline for the rest of it. So, but yeah, it definitely it takes a lot of awareness. And in so many ways, and I think that, to your point that you just made too, 90% of it, or maybe 99% of it, is about the integration. It's not about the peak experiences like the ayahuasca ceremony, or really any kind of ceremony that you partake in that's like blows your mind. That's what I'm describing as a peak experience. Or when you're in a meditative state and, you go to another dimension, or all those things that are super cool that happen to us. Like, those are peak experiences, and those are fantastic. But really, the work is the other 99.9% of the time that we're living our lives, where it's about the integration, It's even talk therapy is another great example. Some people go to talk therapy forever, which is fine, but I think you may have a deeper experience if you go into talk therapy with a plan to end talk therapy at a certain point, and then you begin to integrate what you've learned, instead of just relying on having a therapist every single week to spill your guts to. That's all a metaphor for kind of what we're talking about here. It's vital that you begin to integrate everything that you've learned in these states in your daily life. Otherwise you're just hoarding tools in your tool shed. This is something my mom said recently. You're hoarding tools in your tool shed. At a certain point, you have to go and pick up a hammer and use the hammer. You don't need 10 different hammers. What are your thoughts
Right.
on it? What's your recent experience with this?
Uh, you know, I just want to like step back and just talk about this conceptually because I think that there's a crux of this issue, which is a lot of what you're talking about, which is this idea that like peak experiences and doing things like even going to church or going to a service is checking a box in my spirituality. That as long as I do certain things, then I automatically merit a sort of spiritual life. So I think initially we were talking about making this episode a little bit about religion and spirituality, which we can talk more about at a different stage. A religion is just giving you a series of actions to take. And if you take those actions and you accomplish certain states and you accomplish certain steps and you move down the line, and that's not necessarily untrue, but the actions themselves aren't enough. And this is the trap that we fall into, is this belief that if I'm just doing the right things, then I'm doing it. I'm growing, I'm changing. But so much of the growth and the change that I experience comes from almost fighting myself, right? It does come from this awareness that I've cultivated through some of these spiritual practices, certainly. But all that has given me is an outline of the problem. I can now see the problem because I have the awareness. And the problem is my mind. The problem is the constant feed of thoughts that my mind is offering me. It's the constant more, 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 or you're not doing enough, right? The negative self-talk that I have, my self-consciousness, my self-pity, my worry, my resentment, all of those ideas are things that are going on in my head. And those are the things that these ceremonies and that these rituals don't necessarily deal with. These are things that happen in the quiet of your own mind and in the quiet of your own heart. And you have to deal with them every single second of every single day. The mind never stops, right? It's not just waiting for you to take your hour break to indulge your spirituality. It's waiting for you to engage it and take an active role in it. So when we talk about awareness, and as most spiritual traditions do emphasize awareness, the idea is that we're getting a grasp on what's actually happening in our minds. We're not following what the mind tells us. We're checking to see if the thoughts that we're being fed are true to us. We're checking to see if they are resonant in a certain sense. And we're checking to see if they come from limited belief systems that we might hold. And that's the real work, is saying, wow, that thought comes from my fear of being inadequate, or that thought comes from my fear of not making enough money. And when we don't have that awareness, we just do what the mind tells us. I mean, we just follow what it's prescribing to us. And as we've talked about, the mind is just a problem solver. So the mind is always going to find a problem to solve. And that's why we have this experience of more, more, more. It's because the problems are more, more, more. And that's just the nature of the mind, is to discover problems and try to solve them. So most of the work is reeling that in and saying, there's not a problem here, or that's a problem I'm creating from an old belief system. How can I change that? And that's a second by second decision. And it's a decision that you're going to come across 100 times in a day. You're going to feel inadequate 100 times a day. And it's your job to say, no, this is just my mind talking. That's not actually true. What I actually believe is this. And so we're reprogramming. And reprogramming is very, very in the mud, in the weeds work.
Yes. Yeah, that's the thing, is like, if you inhabit currently a human body, and I would imagine that all of our listeners do, they're probably embodied beings, then like you do have karma to work through. You have this mind that you have to wrangle. And like what I mean by peak experiences is you might have caught a glimpse on mushrooms or something of like oneness, that like universal love feeling or something like that. You might have caught glimpses in your meditation. You might have caught glimpses at a puja or various other things or the birth of your first child. These are peak experiences that really are able to clear your mind. And then unfortunately or fortunately, we have to go right back into like the play of it all, the Leela. And that means that we do have to have that constant vigilance because, yeah, like you're describing, we'll have limiting beliefs or we'll go back into the social programming of, well, it's very important that I have this high paying job. This is the only way to make money is having a high paying job because that equals that, you know? Or you forget the oneness that you experienced on mushrooms and you start yelling at pedestrians when you're driving your car. You start having road rage, or you start like getting, frustrated. It's like it goes out the window. And this is what we're saying is when you start watching your thoughts, you notice how many thoughts, like you said, are not actually in alignment. They're not the ones that you would choose. They're not your preference, you know? They're socially programmed, or they're programmed by religious structures, or they're programmed by another million things, or they're programmed by the way our bodies simply are because of evolution. It takes an immense amount of freaking vigilance. So
Yeah. I think it's funny when you talk about like the peak experiences, like those are the moments when you do have like the birth of your first child, or, you stare longingly into your lover's eyes and you go, oh, this is spiritual. Like, wow, what a spiritual experience. And those experiences are very important because they show us the side of us that kind of transcends the normal day in and day out of life. But it kind of misses the point in the same way because it says that those moments are spiritual and me going to work every day isn't. Right. When I talk to the grocery clerk, that's not spiritual. But when I go to the temple, it is spiritual. But the reality of the situation and what you're talking about with oneness and all of this is that everything is spiritual. That if I am to kind of buy into a belief that God is everything and God is constantly working in my life and that I'm constantly growing and that every single moment is an opportunity to kind of embody the self that I'd like to be, then every single moment is spiritual. And that's the integrity and the honor that we have to give every single moment. So it starts here. The work starts here, which is the realization that there's no distinguishing between the birth of your first child and talking to the grocery store clerk in terms of God. Right? I've accepted that God is everything. So God is not just these bright, beautiful moments. It's also these difficult moments that I have. And when I start to do that, my life becomes very engaged. Like, it's so exciting to me to do some of this work. Like, I am so thrilled because for the first time in my life, after I've developed all this awareness, like, I feel like my head's in the game. And I'm like, oh man, like looking left and looking right and asking every single experience, like, what does it mean? What does it mean? But it's exhausting. It's exhausting. And that's what my mind wants me to believe. But we never stop thinking. Like, our mind is on from the moment you open your eyes to the moment your head hits the pillow. You are having thoughts in your head. And if you're hearing that idea and you're going, wow, I didn't even realize that, I'm just thinking all the time, that's because there's no awareness there. The awareness shows us that, like, whether I am sitting as still as I possibly can, trying as hard as I can not to think about anything, and those thoughts still come, right? So I'm almost fighting a victim without fatigue, or not a victim, excuse me, an enemy without fatigue when I'm engaging my mind. It's not going to stop, so I can't stop. And that's the hard part of this. But it is also beautiful because it does mean that every single moment is this pregnant opportunity to grow and to change. Like, there's no distinguishing between this is spiritual because there are relics involved and there's ceremony involved and there's plant medicine involved, to this is not spiritual. I'm eating junk food. I'm sleeping. I'm doing all these things. Like, every single one of those moments is just as spiritual as the others. Every single moment is infinitely spiritual. So what does that mean to me? when I start to ask that question, that's when I start to do the work. When I start to say, oh man, you mean everything? Yeah, and you say, yes, everything that you do requires you to be vigilant and see how you're responding to those things. It's so easy to go out driving and somebody to, stop short or cut you off, and you immediately to flip out and react on that instinct. When we react on that instinct, we're being very not spiritual, right? The spirituality is what separates us from the animals that we are, right? We are, by all intents and purposes, evolved monkeys, and we are creatures of habit and we are creatures of instinct. When we try to be, or when we start to be spiritual and we start to be more human in the certain sense, it means that we're not acting just out of instinct and habit. We are questioning instincts and habits, and we're acting from the result of that question. So it's a very different life, and it's very different than just having a calendar full of spiritual events. Those
Yes.
things all certainly help. I mean, we can talk about the role of that too, but like, this is the starting point, is that every single thing is God and you are God. And what does that mean to you? What do these big ideas mean for your everyday life? Not just these moments you're sitting and doing this, but every single moment, from the moment you leave here to the moment you die, is spiritual.
Yes. And that becomes, then life becomes something you can really sink your teeth into. Like, that's when it gets fun, is when you start to see everything as grace, including the suffering and including the mundane. And you start to ask, what can I learn from this experience? Then you start doing karma yoga. And I love this quote. My friend Kaleshvari quotes this all the time. I can't remember who said it. Maybe it might have been Krishna, but I might be misattributing the original quote. Um, it's easier to tame the 5 winds than it is to tame the human mind.
Hmm.
I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like that. And it's true. It's easier to do your karma yoga than it is to sit and meditate in the way that a lot of Westerners think of meditation, which is, when I say wrangle the mind, I don't actually mean like control your thoughts. I mean, in a way, but it's not exactly like that. I mean, when you error, I guess you do like kind of subtly, let that thought go and maybe redirect your mind, but it's not like a forcing. Joe Wagner says we're untangling the knot, but really the knot is ourselves. So we have to be gentle. We have to be gentle. Like, I like to think of it as like our body, our literal like physical form tied up in a knot. If you just try to like pull the knot apart, it might even tighten it more, and it
Yeah.
would hurt as well. You have to be gentle, and you have to like slowly kind of massage the knot out and let it become untangled. Um, so that's, I guess, kind of what I mean when I say wrangle, is becoming vigilant, or in other words, becoming aware, just noticing. So much of this is just noticing and then noting, like a scientist, Um, yeah, and then beginning to practice karma yoga, beginning to make different choices based on the things that you're noting and based off your preferences. Like, which thoughts feel better to you? It's actually as simple as that. Which thoughts feel better to you? When you think a thought like, I have to have a high paying job in order to live, it's like, that doesn't really feel good to me. Is that the truth? I don't think that's the truth. I think the world is a lot bigger and weirder than we're giving it credit for when we're thinking a thought like that. So is there a way that we can massage that thought out and, like, I don't know, think a thought that feels better? Like, there are plenty of ways that people make money that don't include having a job that they hate. You know what I mean? Like, that's just an example, but we can do that with every thought that we have when we start noticing, which is truly a superpower, you know?
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree. What, I think that's also at the heart of this, which is just choosing what experience we're going to have and what thoughts resonate. Like, when you do have a problem, like I'm not making enough money, your mind takes that as a problem to solve and works extremely hard to get you more money. And it says you need to you need to, you hate your one job and you're not making enough money. You have to work extremely hard to find this new job and to find a higher paying job. And then it solves the problem, but only temporarily. You'll still find yourself back in that problem once again. And you'll find it either around money or discontentment around your job or whatever it is. Those problems constantly return and the mind just keeps working at the problem. We're not actually getting anywhere. We're just finding new problems to solve. So to actually tackle that problem is to understand what about me makes me think I need more money right now. Taking an honest assessment of my life and saying, do I actually need this more money, or am I chasing a status? Am I chasing material? Am I chasing validation? Like, what is at the root of understanding what compels me to try and find more money? It's not bad to want more money, but wanting more money without understanding why you want more money is an endless pursuit. And this is the root of 99% of the global conflicts that we have in the world, is these unchecked minds that just want more and more and more and more. And they want it for the sake of it. There's no end result. And so we get in wars over this stuff. I was just teaching a class about Julius Caesar, and Caesar just spent his entire life at war and in conquest because he needed that excitement. Our minds can't bear to be with silence. This is why meditating is so powerful, is because it's very hard to meditate. It's very hard to sit alone with your thoughts or even trying to avoid your thoughts. You really start to understand that this is an oppressive force within you and it's driving you to do all sorts of crazy things. And that's what all our world leaders are doing. I mean, I think it was Barack Obama who even said it's just like 90% of the problems in the world are caused by men unable to sit alone in a dark room, which is 100% true. Like the idea that like I am not enough, right, is plaguing those powerful men, that I will not be enough unless I have a more powerful legacy, unless my name is written on most things, right? This is what Trump is doing right now, is putting his name on the opera and putting his name on everything. He's just constantly plagued by this, I'm not enough, and history needs to remember me. And so he pushes and pushes and pushes, and everybody is suffering as a result of it. But we all do this in our own minds too, and we continue to punish ourselves. When we're undisciplined, we are our own slave driver. We are our own we're beating our backs with our own whip. So the idea is to how do we stop hitting ourselves? And how do we stop hitting others? And that is what requires vigilance. And that's what requires discipline. Is you can have this noble intention and you can go into this ceremony and you can say, I want to get rid of my negative self-talk. And you have this beautiful experience where you see the root of your negativity and you go, oh, I had a complicated relationship with my mother and she always made me feel bad. And you go, oh, I got it. And then you think you're done with it. This is the other
Right.
illusion that your mind gives you. It's like, oh, you've seen it. You have an insight. You must be done with it. But no, you've just begun to understand the depths of that relationship's impact on you. And what really comes next is the 10,000 next thoughts that are all rooted in that same trauma or that same relationship or that same unworthiness. And how do you respond to those is what really defines your progress and your joy, right? I mean, without discipline and without this, there's really no joy. There's pleasure, which is the pursuit we go for, which is just constant dopamine and constant reward. But there's no joy, which is more lasting and a product of me wanting less rather than wanting more in many ways.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's so easy to indict those world leaders, but if we are operating from those same principles on a smaller scale, we're no different. Are you going on TikTok shop and ordering a bunch of random shit? I don't know, just saying. Like, this is greed. These are the 7 deadly sins. And the 7 deadly sins, of course, like, I deeply believe in. And, these are things that just get us away from that feeling of oneness that we may experience in a peak experience. Greed, lust, all these things, like, these are what we're checking the mind for, even if you're not Christian, which I would not call myself a Christian, but like, I think they're phenomenal. They're a phenomenal place to start. Like, file through, like, go through your thoughts day by day. and find the sins. Again, you don't need to beat yourself up about them. You just gently course correct. You gently put yourself back on course, and you choose thoughts that feel better, because those 7 deadly sins, they don't feel good to choose. You know what I mean? They take us away from God. When we're chasing things, when we're chasing ass or we're chasing money, we are not eyes up here. You know what I mean? We need eyes up here.
Well, those things also give us the illusion that we're like making our life better, right? If I'm greedy and I'm pulling in as much as I can, right? Like that's the self-interest. So like what would possibly be wrong with that? But what we find when we like go down that train is that we are just wanting more and more and more. And we aren't satisfied even though we got what we initially wanted. Or even envy or lust. It's like, no, what do you mean? Why can't I have these things? Like isn't ambition a good thing? Shouldn't I covet things? Shouldn't I want things? And that's what the mind gives you. That's the pleasure feedback cycle, which your mind is like, no, you want pleasure. You want more things. You want to eat more. You want to sleep with more people. You want more money. And what we find is that after we've pursued that for a while, we are extremely tired and we're extremely unsatisfied still. So, and some of us never ask this question, but why am I still unsatisfied? I got that thing that I was telling myself, if I got this, if I got the house, then I would be okay and I would be happy. We have so many moments like this in our life where it's just like, if I only had a wife, if I only had a house, if I only had XY, a well-paying job, 6 figures, whatever, I would be happy. And when I get those things, I will be happy. And so many of us do get some of those things. And we never take the moment to say, wow, I'm still not happy and I have the thing that I wanted. What could be at the root of that? What
Right.
is that? Yeah. Because it's a condition. It's not, it's not even anything malicious, right? Like it's just who we are and what the mind is. It's not a vilification of any individual to not be disciplined. It's just, if you want joy and you want peace and you want serenity, you find discipline. Most of us, as we've talked about, come to this through the suffering of having pursued these things to no end, only to ask that question. That's the beginning of a
Yeah.
spiritual journey.
It's the best place to be. But that's brings us back to a point I made at the beginning, is like, if we're in a human body, then we have karma. You don't have to believe in karma. You don't have to belong to a dharmic tradition, but like to understand hopefully what I mean here. But like as long as we're in a body, we're learning. So, there's no way that you aren't going to error, and that's okay. Like that's how it's built. We're monkeys. I love our friend Josh always says that Hanuman is the representation of what can be done when the monkey mind is wrangled and perfected, so to speak, as much as it could be. Like when we use our monkey mind for good and we really like become service oriented, which is what Hanuman represents, which is he's a Hindu deity, if you aren't familiar. When we use our monkey mind for good, when we are service oriented, everything changes, you know? You can speak to
Yeah.
that, I'm sure.
Well, certainly. I mean, the other key quote from this kind of sphere is that the mind is an excellent servant and a terrible master. And that's how a lot of us live, is that our mind is our master. We don't have a lot of space between our thoughts and our reality. And that's painful, because when we look at the world and we have an experience, it could be any random experience that you have throughout a day, just a conversation that you have with somebody. There are things that were said, there was an interaction that was had, and then there are all your thoughts about the interaction. If it was good or if it was bad, whatever it is, every single experience runs through a filter, which is your mind. And you can have a total normal interaction with someone, but if you are deeply self-conscious, you're going to walk away from that and be like, they were looking at the zit on my nose that whole time. Like, I couldn't focus at all. Like, they think I'm the dirtiest, most hideous person in the world, right? This is what our mind being our master is. is that we can't even have like normal conversations without it meaning something horrible for myself, really, and going into my self-consciousness. So when I start to do the work, I start to gain a grip over my mind, and I start to, work on that self-consciousness enough, right? Like I see that come up, right? I see that thought of, man, he was staring at that zit on my nose. And I go, no, he wasn't. Like, this is just all in my mind. And I recognize it for what it is and I release it. I don't buy into the narrative that my mind is feeding me. And I do this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times in a day. That every single experience I have, I understand is running through my filter. So I have to constantly question what the filter is. And at a certain point down the line, after I've done this for a while, the mind calms down. And I've worked on my self-consciousness, and I've started to put my mind to work rather than be worked by it. The mind is an excellent problem-solving tool. It's an amazing thing. It is what separates us from the monkeys in many senses. We can rationalize, we can use tools, we can make ideas, we can be creative, we can make a podcast in large part with our mind, right? But that's coming from a more disciplined place. I'm now employing that. Everything does change when the mind is in service to something other than the self, which is what Hanuman represents a lot. The mind is extremely self-centered, and it's in constant service to me. It's constantly trying to figure out my problems, how to make me more attractive, how to make me more appealing, how to make me better at my job, how to make me more money, whatever it is. My mind is constantly working on this problem of my experience and my happiness. And it's always saying, that's not enough, that's not enough, that's not enough. You need to go to the gym more, you need to eat better, you need to do all of these things. And when I have those thoughts coming from a very self-conscious place, those thoughts aren't necessarily bad in of themselves. But when I have them coming from a very self-conscious place, I'm just suffering while I do that, right? I'm just reluctantly eating celery and going, I can't believe this. This is the worst thing in the world. I hate this. And I'm having a poor experience. And if I'm having a poor experience, then why am I doing any of this stuff? I am here to have a full and great experience in my life, and that requires the discipline. So it's the best way to think about this is to stop working on the problem of me and to start to try and work on problems of service. If I am the end goal, I'm never going to be enough. I'm never going to be good enough. I'm never going to be attractive enough. I'm never going to be wealthy enough. But when I start to work towards other goals, like those are accomplishable. And I am in service to something else that is bigger than me. And I stop getting in my mind about every single little thing that happens to me.
Totally. It's so true. Feels good. Feels good to be of service. That's a perfect example of what we're saying too. Like when you find that your thoughts don't feel good, this is what we begin to do. We begin to choose thoughts that feel better. And we can always keep in the back of our minds that service-oriented thoughts feel good, usually to have. And again, another example of this, if you don't like my saying that because you're like, well, I experienced so much suffering and how can I, choose good thoughts surrounding those experiences? You can when you start to identify them as a learning experience. You can have a better thought about that situation when you do it as karma yoga. That feels good. That feels fun and that feels productive because it is productive, because it's helping you grow. That's like taking yourself out of the victim mindset. This is happening to me, and putting yourself in a more empowered space, which is this is happening for my development. You know what I mean? It feels good. It feels good to have that thought. So yeah, we can do it no matter our circumstances. We can change our thoughts.
Yeah. I think you bring up a point that I was thinking about a lot today, which is so much of our relationship with mental health as a society is based on this idea that I can't control these things, right? Like I can't help that I'm depressed. I can't help that I have social anxiety. I can't help that I'm kind of vexed by these things. And we do fall into a victim mindset there. Have to be a little careful here because some of that is true. Like some of us have a predisposition to those things. But again, that's karma, right? When I take that through a spiritual lens, I realize that those are just the things that I am holding on to. I have been depressed at many different times in my life. And what always happens is that I get very undisciplined and I start to buy into those negative thoughts, right? When you buy into these thoughts, they self perpetuate. One thought leads to another. Like, oh, I didn't do very well at that thing. Oh man, I can't do anything right. Man, have I ever done a single thing right in my life? Why am I on this planet? Right? Like it's always a spiral down. So the discipline comes in choosing not to buy in initially, right? And that's kind of how we can escape some forms of our depression, which is to not buy into those thoughts. And that's what awareness gives us, is a dog in the fight. Because if you don't have awareness, then you can't help yourself from following those thought patterns. When you do develop awareness, you even just begin to see how difficult it is to stop a thought pattern once it's going. The mind loops. And so when you do get some awareness, that's when you do have a little more agency in your own experience. I'm not going to believe that I do everything wrong, right? I have done things right. I continue to do things right. I got out of bed. Like whatever it is, I can feed myself a contrary narrative, and I can also take contrary action, right? My depression wants to tell me, yeah, just stay in bed all day. Like, don't do anything. Like, it'll be good. You'll feel better if you take a break from life. If you isolate and don't talk to anybody for a day, you'll feel better. And it feeds me those thoughts too. But when I'm disciplined and aware, I go, that's never been my experience. I do so much better when I'm talking to people and I'm out in the world and I'm getting sunshine. Like, I've never felt better sitting in bed. But when I am depressed, every single morning, it's like, just stay in bed. It'll be good. You'll love it. And I go, yeah, I think I will. Yeah, awesome. Right. And it's such an
Totally.
easier thing to do. So this also requires energy. And that's hard too. I mean, it's really hard to do the work. I want people to come away with that. But it's the only thing to do. I mean, it's the only reason we're here, is to do this work. We look everywhere for people to tell us what we're supposed to be doing. But what you're supposed to be doing is sitting here and working with your mind more than anything. You can certainly take a lot of actions in your life, but we take way too many actions. We believe that we need to be doing something constantly. We need to be scrolling. We need to be whatever it is. And we suffer because of that. So disciplining is difficult, and it's hard fought. One thing that Joe says, taking that dharmic perspective, taking a multiple lifetime lens at this, is he says, your mind has been doing this for 10,000 years. 20,000 years. It's been on a loop. It's been on repeat. It's been feeding you thought loops and feeding you bad ideas. If you are going to try to stop that, you have to realize that you're fighting 20,000 years of habits. So don't beat yourself up when you lose some of these battles, because it's a much stronger army than yours, at least initially.
Oh, I love that. That's so true. I did want to say something about what you just said. People aren't going to like what you said about it being karma to have like a true chemical imbalance in the brain. But I agree with you. We all have our own, like, if this is like a video game, we all have our own opponents to fight in the video game. So I don't know why people get so upset about, the suggestion that they may have past life karma to work through in this life. Like, of course you do, as do I. Not one single person is going to get out of this without bad experiences, uncomfortable experiences. So if yours happens to be a chemical imbalance of the brain, karma is an opportunity. That's what karma is an opportunity to learn, So that's what we're talking about. So take your lumps as learning opportunities. Don't get don't get too caught up in it emotionally, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, maybe just to clarify that idea, like, we all have wounds and we all have traumas too. I mean, there's like, these are very valid reasons to be sad at times and to experience suffering. Like, it's not wrong
Yes.
to suffer.
Yeah.
It's most of what this is, right? Like, if you are suffering, you're doing it right. You're on your way. But it's a choice to try and get out of it. right? I can either accept this aspect of myself, which is like, you're just going to have the blues all the time, or I can fight. I mean, I can try to rewrite that narrative in my head, and I can work on those wounds, and I can work on those traumatic experiences. It's not my fault, or it's not anybody's fault that we have these conditions or we have these experiences. Like, don't think of it that way. Like, oh, so it's my fault if I'm depressed. You're telling me from my last life. Like,
Right.
no, it's not your
Yeah.
fault. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And that's a really hard idea for the mind to wrap around. Is just like, oh, my alcoholism is not my fault. I have a genetic predisposition to alcohol abuse, right? But it is my responsibility to deal with that. And I didn't ask for that, but it gave me a noble struggle. And only when I started to meet that struggle as a noble struggle, did I start to improve, and did I get some freedom, and did I find a spiritual life, and did I find the fruits of living discipline. So we always need to be thinking in those terms. Like, it's not my fault, but it is my responsibility when it comes to ourselves. Too many times we're blaming the world. Like, it's just, don't you see the world right now? Of course I'm upset. And the hard truth about that is that you've chosen to be upset about these things. It doesn't mean that they're not upsetting, but it means that you're holding on to those ideas and you're carrying them into every aspect of your life. And in many ways, those things don't have any bearance on some of the things in your life. You know, a war in Iran does not dictate how I treat the grocery clerk. Like, that's the hard
Yes.
truth.
And yeah, exactly. And what I mean too, and to add on to what you were saying is, yes, you can suffer. You can experience suffering. You should experience suffering. That's what we're here to do. And yet you don't have to identify as the sufferer. That's an important distinction, and one that I've had to learn. Like, that's a hard one battle for me because I like to identify as the one who suffers. It's exciting. You get pity points. It feels good, actually. Like, you can kind of get off on being the one who suffers. You know, I'm so deep. No one understands how deep I am. I'm going to listen to Elliott Smith and curl up in a ball and just think about my depth. Like, I'm so special in my suffering. And yet, it's not productive. It's not actually, when I go a couple layers down, my personal preference. It feels like my personal preference on the surface, and yet it's really not when I boil it down. It feels better to choose different thoughts. So we can suffer gracefully, and we can not choose to identify as the one who suffers, if that makes sense. So that's the last point that I'll make in this episode. That's what I'll leave you all with today. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah. So, I mean, I just want to touch on, you made a really good point, which is like, once I start to develop awareness, I can start to see something like that, which is like, oh man, like, I'm not lying in bed listening to Elliott Smith and thinking about myself like that. There's an element of pleasure to this, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm enjoying parts of this, and it takes away those pity points that you're
Mhm.
giving yourself, because you're like, no, you're just enjoying this. Um,
Yeah.
and when you extend that awareness out, you start to realize that, like, your whole life is going in a pretty downhill trajectory, because the more you choose to do those things and indulge in that particular kind of pleasure, the more you just don't have energy to do anything. The more junk you eat, the less exercise you're doing, the less you talk to people, and everything that's on a macro scale is falling away because you're choosing that short-term pleasure. That's a lot of what we do. So we talked a lot about doing the work again, but just to give people a couple tools for this, and just to come up with how to cultivate awareness, because awareness is always the first step. And any spiritual tradition, this is what your first prescription will be, is to find a way to create some awareness. So you can meditate, and you can meditate however you do it. Just try to do a form of meditation that involves something not thought related for once. Don't do a guided meditation as much as you can, because I always think that it's more powerful to watch my mind from a perspective of not trying to do anything. So count your breath, do taps, do whatever it is, or do nothing. Try to do nothing. That's my favorite kind of meditation, is just trying to do nothing. When I try to do nothing, or when I'm counting my breath, I inevitably end up on a thought tangent. I inevitably have thoughts come into my head. When that happens, just become aware of it. Just say, man, I did not choose to start thinking. I was not trying to have this thought about what I'm going to have for dinner or how I need more money. Those things naturally came. And that can be your first brush with awareness, is having a thought that you did not intend to have. We always think that we're having thoughts, that I'm just creating this because I want to create this thought. When
Yeah.
you sit and meditate, you realize that it's not willed at all. It's not your will
Yeah.
to be thinking.
The thoughts are
Um,
having you.
mhm, yeah. And so let that happen. Let those thoughts come and then gently release them. As you said, you made this point a couple times, but as you embark on doing the work and being spiritual in your life, one of the most important things that you can do for yourself is gently everything, right? Gently let those thoughts go. When you notice you go into a thought, just gently notice that you are thinking and gently release it and go back to your practice. This is one thing I do all the time, which is like, I will have a negative thought come up and I'll be like, damn it, I've been so disciplined. I've been so good. Why is this still happening? I must suck at this. Right. And I've never been off the path more than when I'm punishing myself. It's always gentle. It's always a process, and it's going to take years, if not lifetimes. Right. So the more we can just try to just develop the habit of recognition and develop the habit of choosing the thoughts we want when we can, when we have the awareness to do so, the better our life will be, the better our experience will be. So do these practices and then try to live engaged. I mean, ask yourself that question of, is there any moment in my life that isn't spiritual? And if every moment is spiritual, what does that mean for me? Because those questions, a simple question and a simple practice, will start you on a beautiful journey that will be everything that you think about and everything you do going forward, if you meet it well. And it's the only thing that's worth it. It's the only reason we're.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. That's where we'll end it today, you guys. Thank you for listening. Please, you can find us on TikTok. You can find us on Instagram at The Fault of Grace. And if you wouldn't mind leaving us a rate and review here, wherever it is that you're listening, we'd greatly appreciate it. And we'll see you next week. We'll start posting weekly again. Yeah. See you next week.